Hey everybody, it's the Tiger Minor League Report / Motor City Metrics podcast here at TigerMinorLeagueReport.com. I'm Rogelio Castillo, alongside me is Chris Brown and John, and I will be I might have to jump off the call because I'm going to be on the press call for Scott Harris. So just a heads up, if you suddenly see me disappear, that's what's going on. So my hair is like this because I've been working all day, not because of the trade deadline. Look,
memorable, a memorable trade.
It was a memorable trade line. Yes. Tiger Town says, "I don't know what to say, guys. I'm in the same boat. I mean, I have to look at this from a perspective of being a writer, and also have to look at this from a perspective of a fan. I think the fan perspective is what just happened. And go ahead. I mean, I don't know what you guys' reaction was, but
yeah, well, yeah, I mean, we need to let things settle down probably for a little while to get the full scope of it. But on the surface, initially, it looks like a huge fail for the Tigers front office. Honestly, I mean, they did. We'll talk about the trade they did make later, but in addition to not being able to trade Eduardo Rodriguez or not being able to complete one, they also, unless I missed it, they didn't trade Cisnero or Shreve or anybody else, right?
Correct.
They didn't trade any of their tradable pieces. We thought tradable pieces. Perhaps we overreacted or overestimated the value of all those guys, but a lot of other players were moving. And one of the main things that I had hoped we'd see from Scott Harris when they signed him, and one of the things I complained about Al Avila, was that there was never any creativity. Just not. They didn't try any sort of outside of the box moves. Nothing taking on cash. And today we see the White Sox getting Luis Patino for cash. We see Cleveland getting Khalil Watson in a deal. Like, I mean, maybe he doesn't work out, right? He's had some issues, but it's taking a chance and buying low on people. And it's in the Tigers. They made a single trade for a single player in high A. It felt very much like something Avila could do, right?
John, go ahead, because
Yeah, I mean, I saw Chris's tweet. He said this, either it's a career-defining blunder for Scott Harris unless the Tigers win the Central or they work out a long-term extension with Eduardo Rodriguez. We don't know if that's going to happen. We don't know how motivated he is to stay in Detroit. Obviously, he declined the deal to go to the Dodgers for, I believe, family reasons. I don't know if we're ever going to find out what that deal looked like and what players were coming back. I don't know if we even want to. I mean, what I was looking at is the Baltimore Orioles. I really thought with the Dodgers trade not happening, I looked at them, but obviously they were able to get Jack Flaherty near the end. Only got one prospect for Jack Flaherty. The Cardinals
too.
Oh, they did get two?
They got the Prieto and Rom.
Prieto, one of the best prospects that Baltimore has, a left-handed bat with power. And you know why they got Jack Flaherty? Because analytically speaking, he's good against righties. Righties only bat 235 against him, and they use that wall out there.
Yeah. So if you guys could confirm this, do the Tigers get a comp pick if Eduardo Rodriguez is out?
Nope,
they do not, because
nada. Go ahead, nada,
Boston
nada.
Already gave him a qualifying offer 2 years ago. So and that's the thing. Like, you can say, all right, well, nobody met the Tigers' price. Well, what value do you place on 12 starts for the rest of the season when you're almost certainly not going to win the division? How much does that matter? And I would say basically nothing. They could have traded Erod for, as somebody else said that the JD Martinez poo-poo platter, right? And it would have been fine, because if you really like Eduardo Rodriguez, you can go out and re-sign him in the offseason after he opts out. So, yeah, it just feels like a huge mistake. And it's something, it feels like they weren't ready. How they didn't know that Rodriguez would veto a trade to the Dodgers is kind of stunning. And who knows? Maybe there's a lot more to this story. But it feels like a very disappointing outcome for a team that, we gotta be honest, like they're not really competitors, and this was one of their only ways to acquire more talent, and they didn't. So it's a bummer.
I mean, just if you try to take an optimistic approach, I mean, the hope would be that maybe there's something behind the scenes of Eduardo Rodriguez expressing interest to be here long term, to playing out his contract. I mean, you can hope that, but yeah, I mean, it's tough to see because with the farm system not being as strong as we'd like it to be, this was kind of the guy we looked at from the beginning of the season as the guy who could kind of get that Justin Henry Malloy type of return to really make this farm system a bit deeper, and for that not to happen. And even like the Michael Oreja trade was fine for what it was. To me, what was disappointing was not trading Cisnero or not trading Shreve, not packaging those guys together, like you said, getting creative. I mean, I was even thinking of if there's a prospect in another team's organization that Scott Harrison and the Tigers really liked, sending Lorenzen and maybe attaching a prospect in the Tigers organization to kind of get an upgrade and get a young player they really like. There was really a lack of creativity, and to come away with a second base prospect who, I mean, he has some potential. I mean, none of his tools really stood out to me. He is solid at drawing walks. But it's very underwhelming kind of reaction right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a solid return. I think for Lorenzen, that's it. We have him. My initial reaction is he's probably pretty close to Kevin McGonigal as a player, who the Tigers just drafted. Everybody was pretty excited about. It's a hit first kind of profile, and that seems to be what the Scott Harris front office is targeting: the guys who actually have good hit tools and don't strike out a ton. But yeah, it feels like the subsequent lack of moves, it just remains kind of bewildering, honestly. And we're setting up for a very strange scenario where Eduardo Rodriguez is probably going to get booed in his next home start for wanting to stay in Detroit and not go to Los Angeles. It's going to be a really weird thing. And I hope that fans don't take that out on him, right? Like he through his quality play, earned the right to get a large free agent contract and earned the right to get a no trade clause, and he exercised it. And we're pro labor here, right? This is what we want from guys. We just wish maybe that there was a better backup plan in place. And now I'm like absolutely fascinated, and who knows if we'll ever find out who the Dodgers were going to give up for him, what that deal was. So yeah, I don't know. Tigers fans have to. I've seen some responses to my tweet about saying that was a huge overreaction, and maybe it was. I try to think that I'm not being a huge fan about this, right? I just looking from a business perspective, you're kind of wasting an asset. But again, we don't know the whole story. Hopefully, Rogelio will come back after the press conference and tell us all the details and explain to us why it was actually a good move.
Yeah, we did have donation from Blood Right, who said the baseball gods have turned their backs on us, lowly Tigers fans. I know a lot of people feel that way. And then we had one from Elton C, who said Rodriguez couldn't suit it up for 2.5 more months, then left the team last year. Thanks a lot. Get him out of here. So obviously upset with that. Yes.
It is,
I don't know.
Bewildering. It's strange.
Yeah, to me, it's like, maybe this means the Tigers are trying to compete a lot sooner than we thought they were. Maybe this means Eduardo Rodriguez is in their, short-term plans to compete next year and build a rotation around him, Manning, Skubal, and Mize. The free agent market, like we've said, there's some pitchers out there. Jack Flaherty is a guy I really would like the Tigers to target next offseason. But maybe this means the Tigers are going to try to win and stay competitive throughout this season and hopefully in the next season in a division where there wasn't a single buyer in the AL Central this year, which just goes to show you how open this division is potentially for the next couple of years to come.
Yeah, it's a strange world where we're complaining about a team that perhaps not trying to, fold and trying to compete a little bit, and we saw other teams kind of play both sides, right? Like Arizona traded Andrew Chafin to Milwaukee, and you can do that, but the Tigers didn't acquire anybody else to help now. Their only recourse, I guess, would be to do what everybody's been wanting them to do all year and start calling up Justin Henry Malloy and Parker Meadows and Colt Keith, and hopefully those guys can give you a jolt to the offense, because that's what's really been missing, right? The pitching, for the most part, has been solid this year. It's just the offense goes dormant for seemingly games at a time. but that's an awful lot to ask from these prospects, and people always overestimate, based on performance in AAA. They think, oh, these guys can come up and hit right away, and that's just not reality. But it's just an extremely weird situation that I can't remember a Tigers deadline going like this. Like the one that sticks out the most to me is maybe 2005. Was it 2005, 2008? I don't know. When they traded Pudge Rodriguez instead of going for it, that would have had to been 2008, I think. But yeah, so I don't know. We're just really left to ponder what exactly happened, and hopefully, like I said, we'll get answers on that. They probably won't be sufficient answers. Scott Harris will probably say we didn't like the values that were out there. Rogelio talked about, he loved the return that the Cardinals got for Flaherty. That's kind of what he was hoping for the Tigers. Now, I think he's a bit mistaken about saying Cesar Prieto has power. He's a Luis Arraez light. He's all hit, but he hits like crazy, and that's something the Tigers could use. But yeah, we're in a strange position, that's for sure.
Yeah. In terms of what they did get, if we want to talk about the second base prospect, who
Yeah,
I don't want to butcher his name. If you want to, it's I don't want to butcher his name. So if you want to say it first,
yeah. I've gone and forgotten it.
How you
Lee.
Yeah.
How you Lee.
Okay.
So, yeah, a kid from Taiwan. That if you want to get into weird political discussions, they are known as Chinese Taipei for any athletic events because it's a strange colonized island, or an island that was colonized and dominated by China and things like that. But yeah, he's a kid who has always been viewed as a kind of a gamer and with a good hit tool, and he made some noise last year in low A by performing pretty well. And this year, but he's also had a couple injuries. He had a broken wrist, I think, or a wrist injury, and so he hasn't hit for as much power this year, but he's still hitting for solid average. He gets on base, like you said. There's some defensive versatility. He's played shortstop, he's played third, he's played second. They mostly think that he's gonna play second base. And yeah, we're speculating he'll probably just head right to West Michigan, in high A again. There is a chance maybe that they would bump him up to Double A Erie, depending on how much they like him. I have a feeling that they probably like him a lot, and probably more than ranking services indicate, just based on the skill set. So he could theoretically, slot into Erie and play some shortstop and some third base, because Erie just lost Andrew Navigado, who was kind of, he's more of a veteran presence, but a guy that they've been counting on to play a lot of shortstop and a lot of third base. They also, they sent Gage Workman down to high A. They got Luis Santana there, so it's possible he could go to Double A. But I'm thinking high A West Michigan for the rest of the year. And yeah, I mean, he's a top 10 prospect in their system. Hard to get upset about that. It's not like a super sexy high ceiling, but there's a potential average regular there. And the more guys like that you have, the more likely you're going to be able to field a solid team in the future.
Yeah, and like I said, he might not be the Tigers' everyday second baseman of the future. I mean, you obviously have Jace Young, you have Colt Keith, who could move to second base. But, I mean, if the Tigers are looking to compete in a year or two from now, he's a guy you could potentially trade to get a reliever or a pitcher to help improve your big league club. So I think they got the best player they possibly could. They obviously waited out the market as long as they could with Michael Lorenzen. I was looking at MLB Pipeline. He's now the Tigers' sixth best-rated prospect. Right behind Ty Madden, right in front of Peyton Graham. 20 years old, is hitting 283 in high A, 29 walks to 53 strikeouts. That was really what stood out to me. He didn't, from what I read, he didn't seem like an explosive athlete or a great runner. So it'll be interesting to see. He is, I guess, another Scott Harris guy, so we now have a couple of those guys in down on the farm now. So, yeah, I mean, that's what we got at the deadline. In terms of the relievers, that was another thing I kind of wanted to talk about. I didn't expect them to trade Foley or Lang, even though that some of the returns on these relievers. I'm forgetting it. Paul Sewald, I believe his name was, getting traded to the Diamondbacks. I thought the Mariners got a great return for him. But I think keeping Lange and Foley, having their years of control, made sense. But some of the veterans not getting moved, like a Cisnero and a Chase and Shreve, what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's another one that was really kind of shocking to me. It almost felt like they were banking on combining those guys in deals with Lorenzen and Erod, and for whatever reason they were like back burner deals. They figured somebody would come calling for relievers because you can't have a high price tag on guys like that, right? You know, it's great to trade a lefty reliever for a Reese Olson, but that's just kind of luck, right? You're not expecting that every time. Um, so yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to figure. It's really hard to figure why they didn't move these guys. Maybe they really just had super high price tags on everybody, and nobody met them, and they're content to try to compete and play winning baseball the rest of the season. But you would think that they would at least trade for a lottery ticket, right? You know, I don't know. I mean, when you think about like they traded Roderick Grossman last year for a kid named Chris Anglin, who was a left-handed pitcher who like topped out at 87 miles an hour, and they released him like 3 months later. That was literally trading for just about nothing. No offense to Chris Anglin as a person, I'm sure he's got a great personality, but so you know, doing something like that wouldn't move the needle a ton. But you'd think you could get something from someone. Everybody's always looking for bullpen help, so yeah, just a very very curious trade deadline from the Scott Harris front office, and hopefully, I guess we hope that he learns from it. It gets better. But yeah, I don't know. I thought for sure you could trade a reliever to just about anybody.
Yeah, so we do have a bit of breaking news. So first of all, I mean, there's a couple, but I want to get to the Tigers have made a trade with the Dodgers. It looks like a cash trade. They did get a Eddie's Leonard, a shortstop. He's the 14th ranked prospect in the Dodgers system, 22 years old. I don't know how much you know about him. I mean, this is the first time I've ever heard about him, if I'm being honest. But the Tigers have made another move.
We saw him a fair amount in the Midwest League with Great Lakes, and he's a quality player. He's a legit shortstop, can hit a little bit of power. You know, it strikes me more as a utility type. The Dodgers just removed him from their 40-man roster, so that was one of those things where I think that the Tigers worked out a trade that had basically nothing to do with the trade deadline. I mean, it did because it's the trade deadline, but that was the sort of move teams make all the time. I think the other guy that the Dodgers released, is it Brule, left-handed pitcher. Somebody else claimed him too. So, I mean, that adds more depth to the system, and that's one of those things where okay, that's slightly more creative, right? I'll give him that. You know, using cash to get a solid prospect, but he's not. I wouldn't say that one moves the needle a ton.
Yeah, I'm looking at his numbers in Double-A this year, hitting 254 and 350 at bats, 85 strikeouts to 29 walks, has 11 home runs. From what I'm reading on his bio, they said, yeah, an offensive-minded utility man. Doesn't look like he's going to stick at shortstop. So, I mean, kind of what you were just describing. He'll be another interesting piece for the Tigers to put down in their farm system. Yeah, and then we did have a quote from Scott Harris as well. He said, "We reached a deal he was not comfortable with." This was talking about Eduardo Rodriguez to the Dodgers. Harris says Rodriguez is comfortable in Detroit, and it's possible they work out an extension to keep him from exercising his opt-out.
Yeah, I would hope that would be a focus of theirs now, really. Honestly, as long as it's somewhat financially reasonable. We've talked about it before. You probably have to add 2 years, and I mean, what's he do left? 3 years, and it's like 16 million a year. It's like 49 million.
Yeah, 49.
Yep. So he would probably get 5 in somewhere between 100 and 120 on the open market. So you'd have to figure out a way to make that work. I don't know exactly how. If you could have him opt out and then sign a new deal, doesn't feel like the sort of move that Harris would make anyway. But who knows? Maybe they'll work something out and it won't feel so strange. But yeah, I'm just endlessly curious about what that deal they had in place was. Now, who were they getting?
I know.
Maybe it was
Eddie's. It might have been. I mean, I heard the Tigers were interested in their catchers, Diego Cartia, yeah, and Dalton Rushing, who were two of the top 3 prospects.
Now, Cartaya has taken a pretty huge step back this year as a prospect, but that Tigers may have believed in something that just sort of the way the development works, he goes backwards. Rushing was a guy who had a huge year last year. It is, I think, still fairly highly regarded. So that would have been a nice return for sure.
Yeah, I would have loved Michael Busch as well. 25-year-old can play a little bit of infield, could play the outfield. I would have loved him to play. I mean, he could have played a role for the Tigers this year, but
Yep.
I mean, it's water under the bridge now at this point. But yeah, I mean, the Tigers do make another move. Yeah, I mean, we were kind of getting into the reliever talk. Lange and Foley, I think those are guys that probably, if they were to get moved, it would probably have been in this offseason. And in terms of Cisnero, maybe he's a guy that gets moved in the offseason as well.
He's a free agent.
Oh,
So
he is.
Yeah, that's why he and Shreve are both free agents. That's why it's just kind of stunning that they didn't get any bites there. I mean, they're Shreve is a left-handed. He hasn't been great left-handed reliever, but teams always looking for lefties. And Cisnero seemed like a decent enough right-handed reliever. You throw him in your 6th or 7th inning for just as an option. He's not your everyday 6th or 7th inning guy, and that seems like it would have helped a contender. But who knows? Who knows what the offers were?
Yeah, I mean, he has had a rough, stretch, but still, I mean, he's a solid reliever. He has a bit of a track record. That is definitely surprising. And I mean, just trying to talk yourself into this team competing, it's just kind of hard to see that. They're 12 games under 500. I mean, they're only 6.5 out of the division, but I mean, just the thought of them getting back to 500 is just, it seems like such an uphill battle at this point. Like,
yeah, it's really hard to go on a long winning streak when your offense is this inconsistent. And again, like without 3 or 4 bats magically appearing, it's really hard. They haven't won more than 2 games in a row since early May, I think. So yeah, I don't know. It's just a perplexing deadline. I do think that Leonard was on the Dodgers 40-man roster, so the Tigers, I think, would have to make a move on their 40-man. I guess Lorenzen is gone, so they could just replace him with Leonard.
yeah,
I know that they put Wingeter on the active roster, so that makes sense.
I saw that he was going to AAA. So that'll be interesting. I don't know. I mean, his ETA on MLB pipeline is 2024. I wouldn't expect to see him this year. But yeah, it looks like he'll be going to AAA for the Tigers. But I mean, yeah. Did you have anything else, Chris?
No. I keep finding ways to end up saying the same thing. Like this was just weird.
Yeah, it's kind of like you. At the end of the day, you have to give it time to process it. Only time will tell. I mean, a lot of people are going to overreact. A lot of people are saying, Scott Harris. I mean, I've seen people saying that Scott Harris should be fired. I mean, only other thing I had was like not having a GM. How much does that really play a role in this?
Yeah, I don't think that matters a huge amount. I think that the GM, for all intents and purposes, that the entire front office basically does the same job. There are certain guys who probably have focus areas, but they basically use the GM title as a means to hire somebody who was currently an assistant GM or a scouting director or something like that. Somebody they like, so that they can add another brain to the room. And that's why I don't think he's done it yet. I think they're waiting until the offseason. I think that it's hard for me to fathom that maybe Scott Harris was struggling to do GM duties because he's working on president duties, which who knows what the difference is. But yeah, I just I don't know. I really don't have any answers for people, unfortunately, other than they just kind of screwed this one up, I think.
Yeah, we did have a comment said from Leonard Taylor said, I wonder what the disconnect between Harris and Eduardo Rodriguez was. I mean, there had to be a disconnect because at the end of the day, they had a trade in place. So as much as the best case scenario probably is for him to stay here long term, whether it's playing out his contract or signing a new one. You have to keep that in mind as well as is the relationship damaged now with the Tigers trying to trade him and it not going through?
Yeah, I mean, I think I give Harris maybe a slight pass here on that because 99% of no trade clauses are just for leverage. They're just for players to sort of dictate a little bit more of get more out of whatever their deal is. And it's very, very rare to see players actually exercise them. We saw Eric Hosmer did it a couple years ago, I think, but it's extremely rare where players don't just go, okay, whatever, I'll waive that, if you give me this. Usually that's what happens. So, but yeah, I guess they didn't have a great feel for Rodriguez's distaste for being 2 hours farther away from Miami, where his family lives. So I don't know. Yeah, it's the whole thing. It's just hard to explain. It's hard to explain why they didn't know better. It's hard to explain why they didn't have a backup plan. It's hard to explain why they didn't trade their relievers. And maybe Rogelio, who is rejoining us right now, theoretically, will have some explanations for us.
I have some explanations for you guys. So just
All
got
right.
off the Scott Harris call and didn't really want to go into the negotiations of what deals, what have you. But a couple things. First and foremost, Lee will be starting at West Michigan. And per Scott Harris, he will be playing all over the infield. And there's something that I asked him about, because also, I don't know if you saw this or not, Chris, but the Tigers did pick up Eddie Leonard.
Yeah, our chatters were telling us about that. They said that you mentioned it. So
yeah, he will be starting in Toledo, and he will see some time in the outfield, just as a heads up, because he was seeing some time there before. But Scott, getting back to what he was talking about with Lee, rather, Lee is going. He liked, and it was the same thing with Leonard, because Leonard was kind of performing above his age level, and that's something that the Tigers are paying attention to. So something worth noting that if you see a guy for their age performing better, that's something that they evaluate and take into consideration quite a bit. So, but as far as the Erod stuff goes in terms of an extension, he said that Erod likes being here, wants to be here. But again, what that means going forward, I'm not sure. But he said that every team, there was teams that he didn't go into who or what, but essentially, or even what having the deal with the LA, but essentially he would be perfect for a lot of other teams. But so again, it was a lot of Scott Harris talk. So I'm not sure what if he's going to opt out or not, but apparently he does like it here. We'll see. But yeah, it was Scott Harris looked exhausted. Like he looked exhausted. I mean, I sent you a picture. I didn't send you a picture or anything, but if I did send you a picture, it would probably be him like this, like just, he looked exhausted. He did. And he was talking about not lack of sleep.
If he sent me a picture, he would look exhausted. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. If I did. But
so what I was thinking is like the deal with the Dodgers fell through, but wouldn't they have other deals in place, other deals they had talked about with other teams? I mean, there was an hour left in the deadline when Eduardo Rodriguez vetoed that trade. So was there any talk about, potential trades with other teams, or was it just like
he didn't really get into it? He didn't want to. That was at Liberty. He just didn't want to talk about it. Not necessarily talk about it, but out of professionalism, he didn't want to go into it. So
yeah, because that's what was going through my mind, and I think a lot of people's mind was, a lot of people thought something was going to happen after that trade was vetoed.
I was convinced I mean, we heard rumors about deals in place with specific names and things like that, and nothing ever really materialized. So
yeah,
I imagine that I don't think that the Tigers didn't work really hard on this deadline, right? I imagine them having these massive spreadsheets with every team and what they need and who they might be targeting and what prospects they like, and I feel like it almost feels like they overdid it. Like they probably had the perfect deal in place, and they were waiting, and they seemed to have played their hand right. They waited until Verlander signed, and they had the deal they wanted, and then the one thing they didn't expect happened, and for whatever reason, we all have blind spots, right? They just didn't know that Erod was going to exercise an opt-out. Like, Roger, did anybody ask him about? I'm sure they did, but what about Cisnero and Shreve?
He didn't really address that question either. I mean, not that he didn't address it. He just said that a chance to play, but it sounded like they weren't. He didn't say they were fielding offers or anything. So that was the part that was interesting too, because I think it was I think Cody Staberhagen, or I forgot who exactly asked him that question, but maybe there wasn't any interest in those guys. I mean, if you look at the reliever market right now, but if there's one thing that came across on the call, is that he likes position versatility. That is becoming more and clearer on those kind of little things he's looking for. Whether it's the smartest guy in the room, as Steve Wallace says in YouTube chat, I don't know, but I can tell you this much: they have a type, and it's kind of becoming. If you look at it between the tea leaves, or whatever however you want to say the term, they're specifically targeting a type. And today with the Lee signing, I guess also Scott Harris mentioned that they've been after Lee for a while. They've been interested in Lee for quite some time.
Wouldn't shock me if they probably wanted him in the in the Soto deal, probably, right? Like settled for one of the other guys, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I assumed that Scott Harris wouldn't have any answers that would really satisfy fans because
Yeah.
there's just no way he came into the deadline planning on keeping Eduardo Rodriguez. Just the way things worked out, like,
I mean,
who
that's
knows?
what we heard. I mean, we heard that they were going to both move him. We heard that deal about the Braves in that deal. I mean, like we heard about Vaughn Grissom at some point possibly being here, but again, that's also just, it could be just hearsay. Again, it's just all, but I don't know. It's just one of those things where if he comes back and he resigns, then all is forgiven. But until now, for now, we just have to wait and see, because if he does opt out, I mean, he says he likes it here, but does he take a hometown discount then? Because you look at the free agent market. Go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry.
You're right. I mean, the free agent market, the pitching is okay in the free agent market next year, but he would certainly, I think he'd get more than he's getting from the Tigers, almost undoubtedly. And you would think his agent and probably the players' union would probably push him to opt out and sign a longer deal. So it's hard to see him re-signing. Maybe, we've seen stranger things from players, right? Ozzie Albies and Ronald Acuna Jr. took deals that were well below their market value. So did Jose Ramirez, right? Like we've seen some players just like it in a place and are willing to sign. I don't know. I get to, like, for as much as it seems to be that he wants to be closer to his family, Detroit's not terribly close to Miami. It's closer than LA, but it wouldn't stun me if he ends up signing with Florida or Tampa or Atlanta next year. Yeah. They would all be fits. I mean, Tampa probably not, because they don't like to spend all that much money, but
I will say this. Apparently he does pay attention to what we do, because it's like, how I like my guys. And it's just like, well, maybe he just said it as a general statement. I don't know. But it was because I was the one that asked him about the minor league players, like getting into.
Yeah.
So
you know how I like my guys. Is that what he said? Like
it was kind of like something like that.
And likes to hit.
Yeah, that's random. But then again, I don't know. But
that is. So I like, in terms of like Erod staying. The other thing is too, like, is the relationship damaged? Because at the end of the day, the Tigers tried to trade him. Like, I don't ever recall a player getting traded and then the trade, not going through, and then him staying with that team long term and kind of rekindling the relationship. A lot of times I feel like when something like this happens, it's kind of a sign of things to come, that it's not going to work out long term.
I suppose there could be some frayed feelings there, but particularly, like I said, I think there's going to be a scenario when the next time he pitches at home, he's probably going to get booed when he takes the mound, which is going to be really weird. I hope that fans aren't like that, but unless he's just completely oblivious, he must have known.
This is something. Here's the last. I didn't get this because I wanted to jump on the podcast, but this is what Jeff Sedell asked him point blank. Why strike a deal with the team on Eduardo Rodriguez's no trade list? We were talking through about it, possible destinations, didn't work on the end. I have to leave it at that. End quote. And look, if you're out there blaming, look, I'm telling you this right now. If you're blaming Erod for this not to happen, get out of here, really, because that's just ridiculous. The Tigers stuck with him during a period of time in his life that was troublesome. And I saw people going after him when he was on Twitter, people on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. It just, what the hell? Because look, I mean, the Tigers stuck with him. They had no questions asked. And everybody I remember some of the comments, he's probably screwing around or whatever. What is wrong with you people? Why go after a guy dealing with family problems? Somebody who, trust me, deals with depression and anxiety. To me, if you're going after somebody like that, or like I've dealt with stuff, I have my own issues, but you're going to go after somebody, how they handle their family situation, get bent. Seriously, like, get bent. It's the same thing with this. It's on the Tigers. It's not on Erod. It's on the Tigers. Yeah. Erod deserved or earned the no trade clause. And I don't think he quit on the Tigers last year. He dealt with something we don't understand. And I'm never going to pretend to understand. When I go down there in the press box and I go down there, he's a quiet guy. And he will be booed. Steve, you're absolutely right. He probably will be booed by the Tiger fans. But that's come on. I mean, it's just that's just come on.
I mean, well, I mean, quite frankly, it doesn't matter what his reasoning is, right? As you said, he earned the right. He made it to free agency. He earned the right to have a no trade clause. Maybe he doesn't like Mookie Betts for some reason, right? Maybe he doesn't like Andrew Fried, but maybe he doesn't like Los Angeles at all. Maybe Los Angeles is the source of all his problems. It doesn't matter. It was on the Tigers to know that and to either talk him through that or work around that or find a different trade target. And they didn't. They didn't. And now they just have to hope that they can re-sign him or go on an epic run and win the AL Central and then lose in the first round of the playoffs. But it just it's as I said, like this is going to be something that people are going to remember for a long time. As long as Scott Harris is the president here, unless he hires a GM and just disappears into the background, this is going to be one that sticks with him, I think.
Yeah, in terms of like, placing the blame, I mean, Scott Harris, there had to be a disconnect there to know when you have this trade that is in place and then you come to find out just an hour before the deadline, Eduardo Rodriguez doesn't want to go there. That should have been figured out before the deal was even in place. So if you want to place the blame anywhere, it would be on Scott Harris, unfortunately. I mean, I even saw people blaming Al Avila because it's like, oh, you shouldn't have given him the no trade. Like, that's a little much. But to me, if you have a deal in place, that disconnect between the front office and the player, that to me is very concerning. And we talked about the lack of communication with earlier in the season with Scott Harris not talking to the fans. I felt like we were in the dark about a lot of things. This just kind of goes back to that with there being a disconnect between the front office and the players.
He does talk. I mean, there was one thing that he did clear up. He does talk to the players a lot, apparently. He does. That's what he was saying. And whether they had, again, we don't know the conversations because he said he didn't want to share those, and I completely understand that. So whatever was happened, I'm sure that whatever took place, Erod just said no. Like, this is not going to work out for me. So as far as me being a softie, look, I that's fine. I mean, I'll own up to that. But it's just for some, like, just because you get paid a certain amount of money doesn't make it like again. So I don't understand if you get paid millions of dollars and don't show up to do your job, you suck. I don't understand that logic. If Erod did not want to go and pitch because of what was going on with his family, whatever it was, it's none of my business, and it's none of my if it's going to go out there. It's the same thing with like, in Elton. Yeah, okay, you know what? That's fine. I'd rather get the draft compensation when he signs elsewhere, but they don't. But they don't get any. They're not getting any draft.
They can't get draft compensation for him because I put that up there because people have been saying that they can't get draft compensation because the Red Sox already offered him a qualifying offer, and a player can only be tendered a qualifying offer once in his career. So there's no compensation. If the Tigers lose him, they lose him. They get nothing for him.
And look, Jacob is correct. It's 100% his fault. Scott Harris's fault. However the narrative is, the narrative will be it's Scott Harris's fault not getting it done. And ultimately, it comes on the fact that the only thing I was confused about was the reliever side of things. Not getting anything for Cisnero when you have a couple guys down in AAA and AA that could bring up. So it kind of, fans are kind of overblowing this thing a little bit. But at the same time, I think that I don't think Carpenter's going to lose his. I don't think Carpenter's going to take 2 months off to lose his job. Kerry Carpenter is a different story. Again, whatever happened to Erod, he had something going on that he was going through a divorce with his wife. It was like something.
It was a family thing.
Yeah, it's a family thing. Yeah.
Years ago, Maglio Ordonez had a terrible year, and people were yelling about him and claiming, the whole time. And it turned out that his wife was dealing with an illness, right? And he was playing through that and having that on his mind the entire time. There are human elements that we don't ever account for because these guys are gladiators on TV, and we expect them to kind of perform at superhuman levels. So again, I don't think anybody should be blaming Eduardo Rodriguez for anything. I understand that the impulse to do that just because it was him who put the kibosh in the deal. But again, it's on the front office to if you're determined to move him and get something, it's on the front office to have backup plans at the ready, and they didn't. And it does sometimes you don't perform, right? Sometimes you strike out and that's what happened here. And you just have to hope that Scott Harris can turn it around, because this is his first trade deadline, and it was not great.
Hang on a second here. Let me play this real quick.
It's all there, black and white, clear as crystal. You get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir.
Let me explain the aspect of what I mean by fans blowing out of proportion. It was the issues with going after him last year for the stuff he was going on with his family. That, to me, that's what I was referring to. Fans have every right to be pissed off. Rightfully so. This is ridiculous. I understand that quite a bit. And you have every right to be mad about it, because you expected we've heard it all month. They're going to move these two. And so Scott Harris didn't play his hand correctly, and that is it. And fans have every right to be mad about this. Now, if he resigns, again, we're not having this conversation. But if he doesn't, then it's just going to give you have more questions hitting the off. The only thing I'm mad about, and I said this on Scott Bentley's Spaces earlier, is the Tigers did nothing to get a third baseman. The Tigers, here's the thing that I value about, and there's a question here that I'll get to in a second from Mr. Act Like It. I'll get to you in a second. Baltimore got Jack Flaherty for Prito. I said this earlier before I left the call. They got Prito, a left-handed bat with power, and
he's not a power hitter.
Sorry. Well, I mean, he's been hit with power.
He's a ton of contact.
Yes, but he's been hit with power as of this year, I should say. Pardon me. You're right. But
they got him.
They got him.
You wanted, and he's a good player. I didn't mean to,
Sorry, but
I'm just saying.
Yeah, they could have got Diaz too. Diaz is also another guy that, again, was doing very well for Baltimore. No power. As far as Prito makes a lot of hard contact. Like, the only reason why I was saying about the power numbers is because we've heard some numbers from him that he was hitting the ball exponentially hard. In terms of his power numbers, yeah, you know what? 154 ISO in AAA is not going to do it for you. I get it. What I'm saying is
it's fine for an infielder. I didn't mean to, he's not an empty bat. It just his skill is making tons of contact and getting tons of hits. And the Tigers could use somebody like that. The Tigers should use power too, but I would have been totally fine with the return that the Cardinals got for Flaherty. I think
that would have been perfect. That would have been perfect. Look,
and I think it was damn near what you wrote in your piece. Eduardo Rodriguez. And now we look like idiots. We wrote a two-part Eduardo Rodriguez piece where the first line in both of them is the Tigers are going to trade Eduardo Rodriguez, and now they all made us look foolish.
Dom yourself. Look, I feel stupid right now as it stands. I got egg running down my face. And you make a good point about the White Sox, but this is the Chicago White Sox. This is a team that cannot get out of their own way. Every time they get players, it is like Brandon Day said from Bless You Boys. It is like a clock when it turns 12 every day. It's just going to be a matter of deconstruction with that team. I have never seen – it's been a long time since Chicago's put their act together. If the White Sox somehow can do that, great. Yeah. But the thing is that this is frustrating for me frustrating for Chris and I. We wrote those pieces under the impression he was going to be traded. So trust me, I want to yell, I want to scream, but right now I'm just trying to be as professional as possible because, quite frankly, I just want to be rational about this thing. It's frustrating, and it's just. But one thing I do want to get to this question real quick, and that's from see here. When the call was done, did you walk away with any more clarity before the call with Scott? The only clarity I got was the kind of players that he was aiming for, because Chris and I have been talking about this for a little while now, and he pretty much corrected. He pretty much said yes. So the players he's profiling, they can play multiple positions, they make good solid contact, they walk a lot. That's what he wants. But as far as the negotiations go, I came away kind of confused about the whole thing with that.
Yeah. My question would be in terms of having more clarity about competing for this year. Did he give any explanation about the plan just for this season? If they're trying to still contend, because I saw a tweet from Cameron who said Tigers have 6 games against the Twins this month. They have 4 against the Guardians as well. They're only 6.5 games out. Was there any clarity or any comments addressed about them trying to compete in 2023?
Not really. No, I mean they're just saying they're going to play out the season and really again, even the one question I just didn't realize I should have asked, and I forgot about this, was are they going to still earmark bats for the young bats this year? Because both Scott Harris and AJ Hinch both said in the spring training they were going to earmark bats for the young players, and they have not done that yet. There has, in terms of for the positional standpoint, this is August 1st. Yeah, there's still time, and September call-ups don't exist anymore. It's not a thing. So it's not like they can go do that. But right now, you have Andre Lipsius who's coming back, who could play the infield. He's on your 40 man, and you don't really have an option right now. And it's just like, it's frustrating. And Alton, thank you for the $10 donation.
Exquisite.
Much appreciated.
That's a double donation from Elton. He already gave us 20 earlier.
Oh, nice. Well, Elton, then you get a
exquisite.
A double.
That boy is good.
I mean, it's entirely possible that the young bats that they wanted to earmark playing time for were Nick Maton, Matt Vierling, Ryan Kreidler, and possibly Andre Lipsius, right? And
Justice
Kreidler
Bigby hit a solo home run opposite field.
Hey,
I'll go pull
Justice
that.
Bigby.
Go ahead.
All right.
You can do
basically, all I was saying is maybe it was Kreidler and Lipsius, and then Kreidler got hurt. Has been hurt off and on all season, and then Lipsius never performed in AAA, so they couldn't really justify calling him up. I don't know. Or maybe it was GM speak, right? Maybe it was just nonsense. Maybe
it was a lot. It was, I hate to say it, but it was a lot of GM speak in that regard. Minus the prospect questions stuff of it. It was a lot of GM speak. And I again, it was one of those things where a lot of things he was trying to respect his privacy. I get that part. But yeah, he wasn't giving much away with that. And so, again, it is what it is. And yeah, Big B is a baller. Yes. I wish I had a better explanation than what I'm reporting, but it is. Look, I'm just as frustrated as you guys are about it as a fan, as a professional writer, podcaster, whatever you want to call me, professional evaluate, whatever my title is. I have to sit there and look at it as a sense that like the system is still very thin. You still don't have any bats that are ready in AAA right now, outside of Parker Meadows, maybe Justin Henry Malloy and Cole Keith. You still have to address that. I mean, the draft has helped. Don't get me wrong, but those guys are in complex league. They're nowhere near that. So, but no, Steve, it's okay. And Steve, thank you for the $9.99.
Exquisite.
No, you know what? Look, it's fans have every right to look. Sometimes I get people misunderstand me that when I mock fans or something. No word on when they're going to hire GM Elton, by the way. I just get when I see some of the vicious people on Twitter. Maybe it's just sometimes on Twitter I get confused when I see people attack players, and I don't understand. I don't know. Anyway. So yeah, Scott Harris didn't really, in terms of like just in terms of looking at their farm system right now, he did talked about that a little bit about that, and some of the young guys they feel are going to be progressing more this year. So that was really about it in terms of what he stood as far as the years go, John, to answer your question fully.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a couple comments already, which kind of was where my mind was going. Is this off season? What does this mean now for the off season? Are the Tigers more inclined to be buyers this off season? Because now we're hearing, well, maybe they'll trade the relievers. I just saw a comment from Jacob who said, is Matt Manning more likely to be moved this off season? It kind of just makes you wonder with this deadline, how does it impact the overall timeline of the Tigers, which is in question because we don't really know exactly what the Tigers' timeline is when they really are expecting to contend for a title. So it just kind of makes the water even a little more murkier.
Yeah, and I think, John, what they're going to do this year is they're really going to. I think if there's one thing that we've seen based off the farm assignments is we've already seen kind of the filtering out of players. Like there's a reason why Gage Workman's in high A. There's a reason why some of those players were in developmental camp. They started weeding it out, and I think the weeding out is still going to continue and still going to bring in guys. I think the one thing that I really have had a problem with is the way they've handled AAA pitching. Michael Rimmer with 2050 here. But as far as anyway, but yeah, it's just
we got a lot of chats coming, questions coming fast and furious. The one thing we did get a chance to somebody asked Tiger Town. He said, "Can you talk about the prospect we got for Lorenzen?" We did talk about how you lead earlier, but Rahelia wasn't here. So Raj, if you want to give your thoughts on him, I think
So
they might appreciate that.
Okay, so I did write an article you can find on TigerMinorLeagueReport.com, and I'm going to post it here on the chat. Lee is a guy who kind of crowds the play a little bit, but he's kind of pulled away from pulling the ball so much, and he's starting to make his pull percentage went from like 43% to like 32. And so he's a guy who has some pop. He broke his wrist, or he sprained. I think he had some. Oh, I'm sorry, he fractured his wrist last year, and so a lot of that power that he did have, it cost him a little bit. So that's where the upside about that is he does have potential power. He has a big body. He worked with Adam Everett, former Tiger, who is the fielding instructor for the Phillies, and he is a guy who really works his ass off. He's a red ass, if you will. And so the fact he was talking, David Loria from Fangraphs pointed out that he talks smack in Chinese, which I thought was pretty funny. But he's a guy who's going to go after it. And so that's really what it is. As far as in terms of how he's going to fit into their plans with Young, the fact that he can play third and short also helps his cause. So he does have good hands again, but he was working more on his feet, and that's something he was trying to work on. So I like this move a lot because it was a guy who, if you look at the number again, doesn't strike out a lot either, walks a lot, but he makes really good contact. And so if you're hitting 20 years old, hitting 279 in high A, that's definitely worth something, considering that I think if we're gonna, and this is by the way, this is the final year we're gonna compare the Al Avila era, because I always do this, or we've done this a lot. I don't know if he would have, it's I don't know if we would have gotten something like this smart from Avila. I mean, I don't know. I don't know that for sure, because I know that's going to be the same thing again. And it's 3-0 Pirates. So it's just
hey, that's a quality Pirates team, right?
Oh yeah, another rough start for Manning. At least to start off, but
well, yeah, I think to Roger's point, yeah, we talked about how you lead. Like, he's a quality prospect. I think that he's 2 years older, slightly less than 2 years older than Kevin McGonigal. If Kevin McGonigal were hitting 280 in high A 2 years from now, I think people would be fairly excited about him as a prospect, probably have him in the top 10 in the system. So he's progressing nicely. I think that's kind of what you're looking for. I think that if you look at Lee's body, he looks like there's he can add some more strength. He's already pretty filled out, so it's not going to be like a guy who's just going to, get bigger and stronger, but he looks like he's got some muscle and can turn on the ball. And there are a couple home runs you can see online where he does really turn on the ball. It's kind of fun. Yeah, you just kind of hope for an optimized version of him that maybe, who knows, maybe turns into an Isaac Paredes who is, hitting 230 and banging 25 homers or something like that. But, hopefully he can become an average hitter with average power and play a solid second base. And somebody asked, like, are we worried about the Tigers seem to have a lot of second base prospects, and these things just always work themselves out, right? Like
I was just gonna say he's planning on moving. A lot of these guys is gonna move around. They're not gonna be at one position, just as a heads up. That's the way I got the impression. So
yeah, I don't think Jace Young can really play anywhere else than second base. Keith can move around. Lee can move around. McGonigal probably can move around a little bit. He may stick at second base. That's it. But again, like, not all these guys are going to work out. That's just the way it goes. Look at the Orioles they have a massive log jam of infielders, and they traded one of them. They still have basically all the other guys left.
They still have an army.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Because you never know, and it's nice to have the depth. So I wouldn't worry about that just yet. And I think as John mentioned earlier, if it does work out, you could always turn around, trade Lee, or trade McGonigal, or trade Young, trade Keith, any of those guys if you feel like you can go for it next year or the year after.
yeah, and in terms of like keeping him, I hate to keep bringing up the comparison to the Giants, but that 2021 Giants team had so many moving pieces, had so many versatile players, so many platoons. I mean, you think of a platoon of Jace Young and Lee, a platoon of Colt Keith and Lee, a platoon of McGonigal and Lee, and his ability to move all around the field. I mean, we talked about a couple podcasts ago about the Tigers farm system being so left-handed, a lot of left-handed bats. Will they now get a right-handed bat that can complement some of those players? So he is a guy that it's funny because we were talking about Dave Dombrowski a couple podcasts ago about how when Dave Dombrowski found a player he wanted, he would just go for him. And it's kind of ironic. It kind of seems like that's happened with this trade with the Tigers, which was a trade with Dave Dombrowski where the Tigers kind of identified a player they want and they went and got him. And I think he fits really well with the young players they also have in their system and, could be a piece to their infield in a couple of years.
Well, I will say this: it's something to note. By the way, he did get moved up pretty quickly. That's a David Dombrowski signature move right there. If you see a player move up, I mean, he totally destroyed complex ball and single A, but he moved up pretty quickly. Which is, if you look at it, like, interesting. Dombrowski has been notorious for that. Robbie Weinhart comes to mind. There's been several players. Oh, I know that's a flashback for people.
No, that's a good one. That's
go ahead.
No, lots of them. We talk about Maben spending like 30 seconds at Double A before coming to the big leagues.
Suarez, same thing. He got kind of moved up pretty rapidly. So when I looked at that, I'm like, well, wait a minute. This is okay. Dombrowski was just sweating up, and you know what, Leonard, you're perfectly fine. This is an event. Like I said, I don't judge people. It is what it is. You're good people. Everybody's good in here. And so, but yeah, when I looked at that, I'm like, oh, yeah, interesting. So yeah, this guy here is scoot the pooch or whatever that term is. And he crapped the bed. Yeah, you can look. I mean, there's a couple ways you could look at it. Admittedly, yeah, they didn't get anything for Erod, but I don't got no but. Actually, never mind. This is all I got. It's true.
Yeah. But I like, to John's point, and thanks to your intel, Raj, that they said that they liked Lee. They were trying to get him before, so they did find a guy that they liked, and Cale Org.
Yeah, nice reference. Nice. That's a flashback, Elton. Props to you, man. And Leonard, you're welcome, by the way, man. You guys are good people. So go ahead.
And there is. I mean, this is would be like 50th on my agenda of things I care about, right? But there is kind of a vacuum of talent in high A and below in the system. The Tigers tried to address that a ton in the draft, right, by getting a lot of these promising young prep players. But there's still not much going on there at high A and low A, and there's nothing wrong with maybe having waves of prospects, right? You want good prospects at every level, just in case somebody takes a huge step forward, and because things don't always work out, and as all these prospects we pay a ton of attention to, a lot of them aren't gonna do anything. So backfilling a little bit in high A is fine. It does. I think a lot of us were expecting maybe someone a little bit closer to the big leagues, but again, that goes to, we didn't get that from the Tigers.
Yeah.
Just like, we didn't get them taking those prep players. So I don't know.
It is what it is.
Small consolation there.
Yeah. One thing. So our prospect reports, Lee's going to be on there. So we just to make a couple adjustments. Our top 30 is going to probably drop either tomorrow or Thursday. We just got to do the reports part of it now. Yeah, you know what? That's Elton, good observation. Usually I do wear a hat, but I did my day job, then went to here. So it's just been, I haven't really left this office, by the way. By the way, I haven't
wear a hat in the Tigers, press conference meeting.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, also, yeah, you're absolutely right. I didn't want to have a cap on for that. By the way, Alex Thomas was asked. The Tigers wanted Alex Thomas because we heard.
That's what we heard. Yes, we heard a rumor that they were offered McCarthy and they countered with Alex Thomas. Now, who knows how true that is? Yeah. We heard several rumors, and none of them came true. Right? There are lots of rumors floating around, but I think that was reasonable ask for them.
And the Diamondbacks didn't even acquire a starting pitcher either.
Yeah.
No, that's there are certain teams. I mean, honestly, the Orioles, their big move was Jack Flaherty. Is that really moving the needle for anybody in Baltimore? I don't think so.
But
certain teams just kind of like stood pat and said, we like our club, or we're not quite ready to go all in. Like the Orioles seemingly easily could have gone and got Dylan Cease.
Yeah, but what Baltimore has done too with their bullpen is they have a Yankee, like in terms of Yankee bullpen in their prime, where the Yankees were able to shorten the game with their bullpen, and that's what Baltimore's doing right now. They're doing something similar to what Tampa's doing too. I mean, Mike Ellis, look, the guy. If there's anybody out there that I would like, if he told me to kiss the ring, I would, is Mike Ellis, because what he's done in Baltimore is extraordinary. Is there? Oh, that's a good question. Elton wanted to know if there's no non-waiver trade August trades.
There are no longer the August waiver trades. there is still one kind of trade that teams can make, and it's pretty rare, but you see it with veterans on minor league deals. And the example I gave in Discord was Matt Whistler, right? Matt Whistler is a Major League Baseball veteran, but he's not on the Tigers 40-man roster, so they could trade him to another team later on in August. But that's about it. You can't make. There's no more Verlander trades. The David Cone trade, I think, was a famous August trade, the one that got him to the Blue Jays for the World Series. But yeah, so this is it. This is it. This is your return. You got Eddie Leonard, and you got Hao Lee, and we got Yoop.
And we got Uper.
And we got break.
Hold on. Wait for him. He looks like he's at a game. He's at Iowa and Toledo, I believe it is.
Oh,
are you there? Are you streaming Iowa and Toledo,
Uper?
I just watched Tyler Nevin knock in Parker Meadows.
Oh,
it was a thrill.
Yeah.
I'm getting my first look at Wenzel Perez.
Oh, boy.
Good old Wenzel Perez. Yeah.
There he is.
Nice. So yeah, go ahead, Chris. What do you say?
Can of corn. Deep center.
All right, so we're gonna give you the floor. Give us your take on the trade, and just give us let vent away, Uper. You're the you're not as angry as me, but you do tend to use your words better than I do. So go ahead and take it away. The floor is yours, number one.
Well, I'll tell you, between innings here, give you a quick 1-2 on it. Lorenzen trade, just fine. Nothing to really complain about there. I think the guy fits the overall ethos of what they're trying to build offensively. But to really kick the can here on Eduardo Rodriguez is pretty shocking. I mean, there's no other way to put it, that they didn't have an in-depth plan. Now, we don't know everything. We don't know, how firm was the Dodger deal? Was it set in stone? This was going to happen. We don't know how much talking they've done to his agent, talking about Erod's agent. We don't know if he changed his mind late in the game about going to LA. So there's things we may be learning as we go, but the fact that they couldn't pivot in that last hour and make something out of nothing is really surprising, because there are a lot of teams looking for pitching. So now, I mean, the best case is that he opts in, or they're able to re-sign him somehow. But, to me, this was the lost opportunity. And I'm not all that eager for the next 3 years of a rather injury-prone soft tosser. I mean, he's not quite a soft tosser, but as he moves into his 30s, if he loses any velo, he is a soft tosser. So it would have been much better off to make a good trade today while his marketability was high, and they couldn't do it. So it's kind of a black mark on the organization.
Yeah. We have to also make sure. I know YouTube's going to somehow. You were playing copyright music, so just.
We're definitely getting copyrighted.
Yeah. God. YouTube.
Well, now we have Jack O'Loughlin on the mound.
Oh yeah, he's been pitching better as of late.
Yeah.
But his last comment starts. But no, it's look. I think there's somebody out there. Like, there's going to be some criticism out there. You already see Tony Paul is now holding back from the Detroit News, and he has every right. Again, this was an opportunity for him to make a splash. And if Lee turns out, great, but we won't know until 2 or 3 years from now. But the fact is, if Erod pitches as well, if Erod goes and just goes ham here, then he's gonna get more money. There's just gonna be too many offers out there. It's just that this market, the free agent market this offseason, is shite.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's less than a 5% chance he's in a Detroit uniform next year. He's going to get to free agency. You don't get that close to free agency after coming off a good year. Assuming he continues through the rest of the year pitching well, he's going to test the market. He can say whatever he wants, that he likes it in Detroit, but I mean, come on, money talks. I'm really a little bit surprised. Again, Eduardo Rodriguez had every right to turn down this trade. It was in his contract. No one should argue about that for a second. Just from a personal standpoint, why he wouldn't go to LA for 2 months and a chance at a World Series ring, that's his call. I don't get it personally, but again, it's his call, and I'm sure he has reasons.
Oh, by the way, we did get a question about Eddie's Leonard, and fan of the show, Trevor, a friend of the show, Trevor, who said he's not a fan of him. I'm not sure why, but
Trevor went up and scouted Great Lakes last year. I remember it, and I don't think he was. I think he was big on Tartaya.
I mean, the guy hit. I mean, last year he had 15 home runs last year at Great Lakes, and he's out to hitting 11 home runs right now for double A. Whoa!
Like, yeah. It's John C.
It is.
Oh, it was his ear. Okay.
Trying to hear.
That was all right. Leonard will be getting some time in the outfield. So he was playing a little bit of center field, and he's going to be over. Again, he's just 22 years old. So something you also consider.
We haven't looked at it yet, but I think he'll probably also be in our Tigers top 30 prospects, even though he was just waived and claimed. I mean, I think he was a top 30 prospect in most places to the Dodgers.
Yeah.
The Dodgers have a pretty good system. It does feel like another utility profile, but there's a little bit of pop there. So, yeah, I don't know. We'll have to figure that one out.
Yeah, it's a big copy. All right, so,
Go, guys.
So what?
I'm going to hit the road here, guys.
All right, thanks, Super. Thanks for coming in. All right, Super.
Good night.
You too. Live from Davenport, Iowa, where the Mud Hens are playing the Cubs right now, the Iowa Cubs. And yeah, so
Mud Hens are up 1-0.
Yeah, Mud Hens are up 1-0.
Tyler Nevin single, I believe.
So, and Leonard brings up a good point. The Yankees are 10 games back, and yeah, the White Sox are just what they are. So
the Yankees made one move, I think, right? And it was to get a middle reliever.
Yeah,
that's it. I'm mad. Look at the Yankee fan base right now. I mean, amplify the anger by Tigers fans by 100,000 right now, and plus people. I mean, people. No, 1 million. It's a lot more amplified than that. They're pissed.
It is, and it generally speaking, I think Yankees fans mostly want to go for it and buy. I'm sure there are a lot of Yankee fans who were upset they didn't sell, but I don't know, who did the Yankees really have to sell? I'm trying to think.
I heard Gleyber Torres to the Marlins.
Yeah.
Yes,
let's talk about the Marlins for a quick second.
Yes, the Marlins.
The Marlins. Look, the Marlins cleaned up. The Marlins did a phenomenal. They got Josh Bell, and they got rid of a guy in Khalil Watson that they didn't feel strongly about. The Marlins did nothing to impact their young pitching. They still have a couple hitters in their system, and they're going to compete with Atlanta. Atlanta didn't really do much. I mean, Atlanta did a couple little things, but credit to Miami. All those trades were smart. You got Josh Bell for two guys that you don't do. Pardon me?
Jake Burger
too.
Jake Burger. You got Jake Burger too. And you got pitching. You got David Robinson for the Mets. It's really the Marlins had, to me, the best trade deadline, period. It's the Marlins to me. Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the things, and my buddy Rob wanted us to go through and rank all the trades and figure out who won the deadline and who didn't. We weren't expecting the Tigers to have this giant newsworthy kind of debacle, but it's hard to it's hard to argue with what the Rangers did, right? They went out and they got Max Scherzer and they got Jordan Montgomery. Like, they boosted their bullpen or their rotation. Their offense is already pretty damn good.
Yeah.
The Astros went and got Verlander. Like, anytime I think history tells us that the teams that are buying at the deadline win the deals more often than not, right? I don't know if it's 75-25, if it's 60-40, if it's 80-20. So I tend to lean on the side of buyers, but when you're not a contender and you have to sell, it's hard to figure out. Like, I'm trying to think who got the best return in terms of prospects.
What about the Aaron Savali trade? Getting Kyle
Manzardo. Yeah. I mean, he's a top 100 prospect to some places. It'll be interesting to see what Cleveland does with him, because he stands out most for just his pure hitting ability. There's power there, but he's never been a huge home run guy. Like, you can hope that he hits 20, maybe 25, but he's a first base only, and it's basically all bat, right? If he doesn't hit, you got nothing. In this year, he's not hitting in AAA this year, I don't think, at least not to his previous standards. That was a good deal. I mean, that's a player that I certainly would have taken for the Tigers, but it's kind of, when it's a first baseman, it's really risky, just inherently.
Yeah, my one of my teams I want to point out is the Mets, because I think it was the right move to trade Scherzer and Verlander. You got
What
Drew
teams do you have,
Gilbert.
John? I didn't know the Mets were your team.
No,
just-
no, my winners for the
Oh,
deadline.
all
Yeah.
right.
Because I mean, they essentially bought prospects, but I thought they got a great return for Verlander, and they got Acuna's younger brother for Scherzer. So they are paying a lot of money, but I did think they got some pretty high level prospects in return.
I would like to go back and look at our season preview because I feel like we all kind of were like, yeah, the Mets have spent all this money, but look at that rotation. Like things could go south really quickly with a bunch of old dudes, and I think that's exactly what happened. What a disaster for the Mets, right? Like going all in on all these big names and then suddenly having to get rid of them. But as you said, like they at least did the smart thing and ate a bunch of money to get some solid return. Gilbert and Clifford are a solid return from the Astros, and like you said, Acuna is a fun one from the Rangers. I don't know. It's but I think I agree with you, Rogelio, that the Marlins they had a smart deadline. They addressed, like, I don't know if Josh Bell hasn't been great this year, but he's a guy who's proven he can hit in the past, and it wouldn't be shocking to me if he turns it on for the final month and a half of the season. They addressed some needs, and they're going to try to compete in the NL East, which is fun because the Braves are really good, the Phillies are solid, so it's nice to have the Marlins continue because that's not what we're used to over the last 25 years. The Marlins were almost always just a doormat, right? And it's fun to see other teams go for it a little bit.
Yeah, and I think like the Mets, they now have some prospects in their farm system. When a Dylan Cease eventually does get traded, they're could be a favorite for him. Shane Bieber, like I think they're kind of in a retool in a sense because they still have Lindor, you still have Pete Alonso, Brandon Nimmo, Jeff McNeil, Starling Marte. Like they still have a lot of win now pieces in place. I think it's just a bit of a retool in a sense.
Right.
Now, Max Scherzer, there was a comment. I don't know if you saw this.
Yeah.
Max Scherzer had a statement where basically he said exactly what Billy Epler told him, and it was that they weren't ready to compete next year. And it was more likely 25-26, and that was why Scherzer was like, all right, see ya. And he put it all out there, which is kind of wild. But that's Max Scherzer for you. Like, I don't think he's gonna, mince words. So it'll be interesting. Yeah, but who knows with Cohen, right? They may go all in on Ohtani. I would think he will try, but and maybe clearing some of this money helps. But they didn't clear a ton of money.
This was not worse than a Vila trade deadline. No. You literally got Jake Rogers, and that's barely Jake Rogers. That's it. There is to me that is still one of the worst trades of all time. You can't. I'm sorry. How can you judge something within just an hour after it happened?
Look, Eduardo Rodriguez is a good pitcher. He's a good player. The Tigers traded away Justin Verlander, Ian Kinsler, Justin Upton, and JD Martinez, and they got Jake Rogers out of it.
That's it. Buckus.
Those are MVP caliber players, all stars. Those were franchise players, and they got one solid catcher.
Zero.
4 years later? 5 years later?
Sorry.
Yeah, we don't need to beat the dead.
Let's not beat the dead horse. Okay, so at any rate, what I wanted to announce real quick is so we have a show coming out tonight at 8:30, and it's not us. It's a show called Bleachers to Speakers, and it's two gentlemen that are going to be joining us. They're going to be part of our little podcast network thing, and no, I'm not competing against anybody. Yeah, people do see me, man. It's true. It's absolutely correct. So Bleachers to Speakers has two guys on there. It's June Whitfield and BFOS. That's his co-host, and they're going to be talking about the Lions. And so just give it a shot. If you like it, great. Just the reason why I wanted to introduce these guys on our channel is they're going to be part of our little Motor City Metrics network thing. So but shout out to June and BFOS. They're ready to go. And hopefully check it out and let us know what you think. So we're going to be setting up here. They're going to be starting at 8:30 on our stream rather. So, but just wanted to give them a little bit of a shout out too. I've not had a chance to really talk about them because everything's going on. And, but yeah, shout out to everybody. Thank you everybody for tuning in this evening. We really appreciate it. We will have a show on Thursday. We're going to have the segments back. It's been a while. I haven't done a Thursday show in 2 weeks, so I'm due to come back. And we will have full segments. Maybe something else happens. We will be out there for Lee's first appearance in West Michigan. It's just going to either be Thursday or Friday. We're not really sure at this point, but thank you, everybody, much appreciated. And yes, you will see it back on Thursday. And if, again, all content. If you want to check out the article on TigerMinorLeagueReport.com, I got the Lee report there, and our top 30 is going to be dropping probably the next day or two. So, thanks everybody, much appreciated. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks, guys.